Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive, the podcast that skips small talk and goes straight for the concepts that shape our thinking and behavior. In this podcast, cold expertise is defenestrated as warm philosophy is enthroned in an attempt to explore the field in which we're all scientists looking for answers, living well. Hello, world. Welcome to another episode of the Deep Dive with Eyal Shai. Today I'm joined by Dashiell Bark-Huss. Hi, Dashiell.
Hi, Eyal.
It's good to have you here. And without further ado, I'd love to hear from you. What is an idea or concept that has helped you live better?
So an idea that's helped me live better is being very patient with myself and taking things with a long view and dedicating my days a little at a time towards the longer view. So the first, the beginning of my exploration with patience was when I started to work out. I've been throughout my life, I tried to start a workout routine many, many times, and I would go to see a trainer, and we would work out for an hour, and he would push me really hard. And then I'd be very, very sore that week, and it would be really hard to work out more that week. And maybe I'd keep up that routine, like seeing a trainer like twice a week and having trouble going to the gym the rest of the days for 2 months and then stop. And then finally, I always wanted to be one of those people who like worked out every single day, or like just like made working out a habit. And I was never very athletic, and so I just decided that I was going to do that. I was going to be somebody who worked out all the time, and I was going to start with just working out for 1 minute every single day for a month, and I wasn't allowed to work out anymore. So I wouldn't feel bad if I didn't work out more than a minute. Like that was all I was allowed to do. And I did that for a month, and it was easy to commit to. So then I did it then I did it the next month. I did it 5 minutes every day. And then the next month I did 10 minutes every day. And then it got bigger and bigger until it became like a normal routine. And now that was in 2017, I think. I think it's been 5 years, and I've worked out every single day. And it's like something I don't notice, and it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really interested in hearing how did you first come across the idea at all, and before then, did you have any? Were you giving yourself a hard time over not actually picking up habits that you wanted?
Yeah, I think I just like, I don't know exactly where I heard the idea. I might've been reading books like about habits, probably. And I think I heard something about like, consistency, like it's more about consistency, And so I just shifted my mind from when you first work out, like you want to already be like strong and like you think you're going to get like muscles in the next week, or like be like like the gym rats. But so it's patience. You have to stop with like thinking you're going to be what you want to be in a really short time, and realize that if you can do it if you could just like commit to it, then we think we can do a lot more in a shorter time, and we like underestimate how much we can do in a long time. So I started to just think about that, like, well, if I'm not going to am I okay with being like a little flabby for a while still, but being really fit in 5 years, and then like continuing to be a fit person for the rest of my life? Yeah. And it's not working for me to work out so hard every day and then quit. So I don't know if I heard somebody, I don't think I heard anybody do the 1 minute a day thing It was just something that I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like snowball into this so that I don't even notice it's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I really like it. I think that in general, patience is not a virtue that's embodied by many young people these days. If you look at least my parents' generations and even more so my grandparents' generation, people did work decades toward the goals that they had in mind. And I think that this definitely changed with the rapid progress that we made on the technological front and things like that. Is we can come up with an idea in an instant, like you say, about where we would like to be. And then the hard part begins of actually ordering, setting way stations along the way until you get to or waypoints until you get to the actual goal. And I myself have not been excelling with this for a long, long time, because I would be so excited by the idea itself, like you say, and I would already want to be there. And then if the work that's needed is not going to take me there within days or something like that, that would be demoralizing. And I do think that it's overall, over a long period of time, that is a self-defeating kind of pattern, isn't it?
Yeah, that makes sense with technology. Also, because we can just see what what they look like in the end.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And people don't really like to share the middle parts. Like they like to, and people don't like to share with other people, like the stages from the stage of growth. But also, it's just not a popular thing to talk about and share. Like, oh, I heard somebody started working out and they like I don't know, and nothing's happened. Like, you're not sharing that news with your friends, so we're not encouraged to like share it with other people and see it. And so and that's also happened like with other things like coding and growing my business. Like, I noticed that people were really impatient with the middle, especially with the business. People would ask me when I was growing Wish Tender, they would be like, when I was in the beginning, they'd be like, "Oh, you're still doing that?" Like, they were like, they had no patience for me. They didn't have patience for me to grow it. And if like, you have to have patience that people aren't going to give to you. So that's what I realized. Like, everyone got impatient with me learning to code and me growing my business way before I did.
Yeah, that's again, I can relate. I mean, this podcast is still work in progress, and it's by no means has made any sort of did not explode, let's say, and it does feel like a long plateau, and I'm trying to be happy with that, because it also comes from the fact that I'm not rushing anywhere. I have this wishful thinking that it would be a source of income for me to just make a humble living, and that this could be seen as something that does contribute to the world. And so maybe people would want to contribute back, but I don't really see it as a do or die thing. And it kind of helps me be in that long middle path. And I think that was a cure for me for that problem of really wanting to get there, is just kind of letting go of the aspiration. In a sense, it's just like, let's start doing something because it is first and foremost fun for us, and the process is enjoyable. And then I don't have to be so anxious about what actually happens in the end, which, I assume with any sort of startup, it's the same thing, because success, like material success or anything like that, cannot be guaranteed, could it?
Right. Yeah. So I was okay with it failing from the beginning, because for me, it was like a learning experience. It was my first, it's my first real like project that I tried to do after learning to code. And I always thought even if like it doesn't take off, it's just like good as a learning experience for me. And it's just my first project. So I didn't care what happened. I obviously like wanted it to do well, but that's like hard. That's a little like mentally hard to have people like to know that you're okay with failing and the people around you maybe aren't. Like that was difficult for sometimes, and like you have a lot of people who don't really see it the same way, and that's where the patience with myself helped a lot, and being more patient than other people are with me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So you mean some people obviously are not going to feel comfortable with a loved one, let's say you in this case, taking a path of, going into the unknown to some extent, right? So a lot of people want that base to come back to, the stability, the being able to predict where you're going to be in a little while. And then you have to sometimes supply your own belief in yourself, right? Basically, it's also something that I found out, that nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody's going to do the believing in you for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people in the beginning were very didn't really believe any like that what I was saying. I think I was more optimistic in the beginning, but then there was a point where people were more optimistic than me, and I was like, I think once they start seeing a little anything, they're like, oh, you're the next Elon Musk. And I'm like, no, I'm very far from anything. But people need to see proof, and they don't really care about your progress. So you have to learn to care about it yourself.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I love the way that you put it through the perspective of patience, because that's what it is. I think that in our culture, the culture is of like, be a tarantula, in the sense that it's like you have to go out in the forest and actively seek prey and chase things and hunt them down. And a lot of things in life call for different behavior, maybe more like a frog, sitting there knowing what could happen, but not necessarily knowing when exactly. And looking at things from a stochastic point of view rather than deterministic, meaning that, I know it's totally possible that whatever I'm doing right now is going to succeed, and it's possible, and I don't need more than that, and I can't have more than that, because the things that are brought to our attention as like, here, go down that path and you'll be successful, are that middle path that kind of sentences us to sort of never being completely free, right? And if you want to be free, you have to just know that there's a chance that it's going to materialize or succeed, but not know when, and then just do what you can to allow it to happen, rather than very forcefully bring it about.
Yeah, rather than having a hard set goal, it's better to have a path, like something you're going to do. And people ask me a lot what in the beginning of the year, like where I want Witcher to be by the end of the year, or people always ask me like where I want things. What do you want to get? Where do you want to be? What's your goal? And I don't really like that, because then if I don't hit it, I feel like a failure, even if I did every single thing I should have done in between that time. I just like to just keep going and see when I do what I need to do, when I market with Tender, when I code every day, like when I have little goals of things I need to accomplish. Whatever happens outside, that's not really in my control. So it's not, and then also if you have a goal, like if I have a goal, like, okay, I have to make $10,000 MMR in a month, like or MRR in a month, then I might lose focus on what's important just to hit that goal. Like I might totally change the business just so I hit 10,000 MRR. But it's not always like these metrics aren't always important. I want to hit 10 RR, which I did this month, I think sort of, but I want to hit that knowing that I built something I'm proud of and that I like, and then I'm happy to continue building, and not just, oh, I hit this number. So like the whole picture is important, and what you do every step of the way builds that picture, and not one metric at the end of a certain time frame.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think that another reason why we as in generally the general populace, not to be so patient is, I think, because we're also bombarded with these, and you mentioned it, like images of what success looks like and what it has associated with it. Mm-hmm. But what we're led to believe, I think, in large part, is that it's kind of the pyramid is put on its head, and that is showing, well, really successful people or really good products. Well, now they have all these fans, followers, whatever metric that can be associated with success. A lot of money, a lot of followers, and so the focus that is put forth is get those followers, right? Because it's correlated with success. When in fact, and this is somehow easier to talk about, because I think the rules for building a following or building an audience or something like that are actually simpler than taking your very idiosyncratic way toward success, which you're mentioning, working behind the scenes, doing this work that is not usually shown to the world, probably because it's not glamorous in any way, and the focus is put on the glamorous aspects of work, of success, and people are pushed to work on that. So I see that with Twitter is a prime example, because you see all these tips for audience building. But what are you actually going to tell this audience? I always wonder. It's like, what do you do with this audience? Then you think, if you have an audience that you've built because you tweeted like crazy about something, so now you're going to put any product out there, and these people are just going to buy it, or it seems bizarre sometimes.
Is it the monster that is Twitter?
And just the notion that if you have an audience, that's it. You've made it, and it's like you haven't made anything.
No, sometimes I don't even want an audience. Like I love that I love admiration, and I love that I have followers, and I think that's really cool. But then when I had a smaller account, I could post whatever I wanted, and I wouldn't feel so self-conscious. And now I'm thinking, like, I have followers from this group, I have followers from this group, I have followers from this group. I don't really want to upset people, and I know people don't, and I also don't, like, I want to do what I want to do still. So sometimes I think that the idea that speaking in a way that's useful is a good concept. So not trying to say things that like the audience will enjoy is a good idea. But I also don't want to not be myself because I'm worried about what people are thinking. So sometimes I'll post something that's not like offensive, but it might be boring, or it might be just like give a little clue to some people that I'm not some box that you think I'm in. And the point is to cull my followers. So I'll post something that I'm like, I think I'll lose followers over this, because I just want to get rid of anybody now who might have a problem with me in the future. So I'll post something like small. When I was learning about NFTs, a lot of people didn't like that. And someone was like, if you start sharing more about NFTs, I'm going to unfollow you. And it was also someone like I kind of knew. I had people who knew me unfollow me. It's like, you can use the mute button, by the way. It's like, to not hurt people's feelings. But they and I just learned about it for a little bit, but like I've always learned about online. Like that's my process. Like I post everything I learn online. Now I don't do it as much, but since I learned to code, I've been coding everything and posting everything online. And NFTs is a thing I wanted to learn about. So, and Web3 and blockchain. So I was learning about it and I was posting about it. And that was only for maybe 2 months, and not every day, just like maybe once every 2 weeks or something. And people, like, I don't remember the point of this exactly, but people were upset with me for sharing just a little bit of that. And they were calling me a crypto bro. And some people were like strangers, especially people who found me through Wishtender. So yeah, so I guess the point was because like there were these I had a bigger pool of people looking at me. I don't know. They just felt like they could tell me, they could like say things to me about what I was learning. Like, you can't do that. And when I had a smaller account, I could learn whatever I want. But that learning things, like I'm not posting that I'm an NFT company and like, or right, that I designed NFTs I'm going to sell. I'm just learning about this. And most people won't do that. So people would criticize me and say, you're a crypto bro, when I was doing something that most people were probably doing who are engineers or CTOs. Like, they're learning about new technology. I was learning about it publicly. I was showing the little gritty things that people don't want to like share, but I like sharing those details. I like sharing, like, this is just what I'm learning and this is my process, and I'm not good at this yet, and I don't know anything about it, and I don't even know if I like it. I don't know if I did at the time. I didn't know if I was pro NFT or against them, and I was kind of critical of them. But people thought I was like really into NFTs because I was showing the process. So
yeah, I think that it's really striking how you could get so easily sidetracked if we chase like adoration, because and I get why you say you like it. Of course, I think we all like it. We all like seeing. I mean, that's why social media is so popular, because you can see the likes rack up, and you can be. But this is the opposite of letting your actions speak for you, right? Because then if you somehow develop a persona that gets you these things, then we are just so wired that we get our fill for a moment, right? And it's sort of like empty calories, because you're not going to feel very full for long just getting likes. Right. But then you're on that treadmill, and I think that it does get people sidetracked from whatever project they were working on patiently, that, ultimately getting to a point, and I don't think a project is something that necessarily ever finishes and you launch. Like, sometimes it's just your life's work, but a project is something that speaks for you, right? You don't actually need to do that. And I think that actually the people who are at the top of their trade or whatever they're doing are people who have not ultimately built an audience first and then did something with it. Although, the Kardashians might be an inspiration to do that, yeah. I suppose. And also I wanted to go back to something you mentioned, which is doing something and treating it as a learning process, as with your coding journey or founding your first startup. I think that's massively important to tell people that whatever you're going to do is going to be part of your resume and is going to be part of your soul going forward and part of your mind. You're going to learn new things that cannot be taken away from you. And ultimately, it's very interesting, because even if you started something which is financially unsuccessful, I think whoever is going to look at you and assess you as a person, as maybe a potential employee, a potential partner, anything like that, is going to be impressed, regardless of whether this made money or not, because I think anybody who knows anything about the world is that it takes luck too, right? And if you can show that you are the kind of person who puts in the work patiently and just works on that rather than pulling off publicity stunts, that says something. That says something about you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's, I had been showing my whole process because I thought, yeah, even if I don't succeed at what I'm doing, like my process will show what I did, what I tried to do to get there. And I do feel like with Wish Tender, I was sort of lucky. Like I never paid for marketing. And I saw what my competitors did. They did a lot of they put in a lot of money. It looks like they put in a lot of money to grow what they did. And I think there's merit to growing to growing more organically and to growing by paying for things. So I don't think one way is better than the other, but it felt like, oh, if I didn't pay for marketing, there must be a lot of luck involved. And I maybe couldn't be here if I didn't get lucky and people started sharing what I built, and just finding the idea was lucky. Like I didn't come up with it; somebody brought it to me, and so there's all these people building in public on Twitter, and they're all trying to come up with ideas, and I was just lucky that one got brought to me. But then also not really, because I had been very open with friends that I'm like looking for an idea to build, so please come to me with any idea. So then a friend came to me with one, and then it was like, oh, that made sense. But yeah, I really wanted to share the process to put myself in a good position in the future, but also because I wanted to see what other people were. I wanted to see people's process, and there weren't a lot of examples of what people did to get from one place to another. It was just like somebody starts to code and now they have a job, or somebody just like all of a sudden they have a business. And so I always want to know, like, what are the steps? Like I want a behind the scenes. So I started sharing what I was doing to get from here to there, and hopefully other people who also have like a patience for themselves will try to look through what I did and be inspired by it. I think there's a lot of people who just want to see, like, when I win something, and when a big goal is achieved and I post it. I noticed that when I post, I used to get more attention on blog posts about how I did something when I was smaller. Now the account is bigger. I get when I post something like, here's like a step-by-step of how I did something, how I grew Wish Tender, or how I designed this page on my site. Nobody interacts with it anymore. And that's how I got to where I am. But then when I post something like, this is where I am, here's a picture of my Stripe page, everybody shares it, everybody's obsessed with it, and I'm like, this isn't the important part. Like, it's how I got here that's important.
Yeah, that's a great anecdote. And yeah, I mean, it shows a natural tendency to really care for the results. And there's a little story that I think I shared before in the podcast, but it's worth repeating. And I think it's Penn Jillette, who is a famous Las Vegas magician, or whatever they call themselves, illusionist. He said that, growing up in a small town, I think around Chicago somewhere, he never knew anybody in show business. He didn't know that it was a viable way to make a living or anything like that, but he wanted to be a magician. And one day he just stumbled on the bootleg recordings of the Beatles from the from the studio where they're just playing. They're just messing with the instruments, and they're messing things up, and they don't do it right, and they feel frustrated, and all that. And it was a light bulb moment for him, because, so they don't just sit there, drink a beer, and then they say, okay, now let's go make a masterpiece, and they get in the studio and something like, all you need is love is coming out. It's like, no, this is exactly what you're saying. Now he got a glimpse into the bulk of the iceberg and not just the tip. And this is so important. And there are literally no shortcuts, I think, for all the attention that the Kardashians drew to themselves and really inspired a lot of people to be famous for being famous. How many people have done it? That's a totally freaky thing that happened. I don't think there is another like that, and I could probably think of one or two artists who have just by chance were discovered when they were 10 or something, and it was just so easy for them. But that is far from being the rule, right? So we need to remember that the hard work must be there. And I don't know, you know what? Now that I think about the 1 minute a day thing that you mentioned, saying hard work is actually kind of, it could be a fallacy. Maybe you just want to do the consistent work. Maybe it's not hard.
Yeah, I think if you train yourself, 1 minute doesn't seem hard, right? But if you go from that first month of 0 minutes to 1 minute, that's easy. And then the next, going from 1 to 5 is easy. And then going from 5 minutes to 10 minutes is easy. But even going from maybe 0 minutes to 10 minutes a day would have felt hard. So It's like, it's just snowballing. Actually, I remember when I started doing this, I was reading a book called The Slight Edge. And this book was kind of about this like snowball effect of growth, where you do a little bit, and like you don't really feel the changes. Mm-hmm. For me, it was almost even addicting. Like it was so small of a change that it just became my new normal. And now, like when I code, like I want to code. It used to be hard for me to get to the computer and code, but because I've snowballed into the habit of coding every day, now it's hard for me not to code. Like that's what I want to do on a weekend at night. So, but when you do that, like it's like all of a sudden it's like whoop, it's this exponential curve that you don't even feel it. Whereas if you went from nothing to trying 45 minutes of workout every day or 8 hours of coding every day, it would feel really hard. So I don't even think I like seeing things as hard, because you won't do them. So I do whatever I can to make it easy. And I just use time as a way to get to where I want. Even with Wishchender, there were a lot of people when it was in the beginning, it had no traction. And I was going to all sorts of other founders and older people who were in business for longer, people who are my age, who were like maybe had a second business or were also founders the same level as me. And everybody was, I asked them, like, what should I be doing? What am I doing wrong? And they were all really worried that I was messing everything up. And that's why we weren't getting traction. And they were like, oh my God, you didn't do what you needed to do. Like you built this for a year without doing XYZ, like without talking to customers. I did talk to customers though, but they thought like I didn't talk enough or I didn't ask the right questions. And they were like, why don't you know why your users want to use this app? And I was like, no, I do know why the users want. I asked them and they said, oh, security is really important. And this is really important. And then everybody would be like, no, that doesn't answer the question. Those are features but it was just time. Everyone was like, oh, you need to change your logo. This is wrong. This is wrong. But everybody just freaked out too fast. Like, and the advice I needed was like, you don't know. You just need to be more patient. And that's what happened. So I said, okay, well, I'm having a really tough time. I'm going to give myself 6 months And if in 6 months I feel like nothing is going on, then I'll stop. So I just did the same. I just kept doing what I was doing, and then it just started to grow. What were we originally?
I had this thought, talking about about how starting things is hard, and then just gets easier, because I was trying to get just thinking in graphs. Sometimes it happens to me in geometrical shapes and stuff, but feeling like it's quite interesting, because I think there are two major steep curves when you look at any project like that, which the first one is really the learning curve and probably the effort curve that you have to put in to learn. And that is very steep. And because we tend to see the short-term kind of cycle of things, this looks very intimidating. And to a certain degree, it is, because you really can't know what's on the other side of the hill, right? When you start climbing, you really can't know. You can't see that far in a very real sense, I think. But this first curve, this first climb, actually really opens the possibility of a second steep curve coming ahead of you. And that's more the curve of just where it becomes easy for you, and the curve of effectiveness of what you're doing actually. And I'm not talking about, it's bound to succeed or anything like that, but just whatever it is now, it's almost like non-linear. It's not that you learn and with learning things get done. No, you have to climb up one peak. And then it's like, oh, I get these things. Like I have a more coherent worldview of what I'm doing or anything like that. And then you could make another jump into the next level, because you're actually understanding what you're doing and you're more focused on the goal. You're more technically skilled and so on. So just in my mind, there popped this kind of graph of two subsequent humps, kind of curves that follow one another.
Yeah, there's definitely like getting proficient enough to where you can get into a flow. Like you have to get over that point. But for me, having patience to get through the hump, I think I probably took longer than most people would have for a lot of what I do. But then eventually, like maybe more people should do it, should do it that way, because otherwise there's just so many people who are who can do things a lot faster, but then like they quit. There's a lot of people who I thought were like about to like pass me up really quickly, but then they quit. So the hump doesn't have to be, you don't have to push yourself like so hard through it, maybe that first hump.
Right. I'm also wondering, because you're more steeped in the tech scene, I'm also wondering if like at large in society, is it reflected in how capital is what do you call it when they look for capital, like the startup founders, like raising?
Oh, VC?
Yeah. If capitals are raised, if capital is raised, also do we generally look too much for these charismatic leaders who promise us that they can do things very quickly, rather than look for people who are going to do something for the long term? And then, I think the charismatic leaders are going to build something that's really based. I think a lot of people will be motivated and rally to the cause and so on. But whatever they're building could be a lot more volatile and unstable, maybe, if the foundations are not hard work, but just charisma and, this kind of just charisma and being able to really market themselves very well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. With and that's like a big difference probably too between a bootstrap company and VC companies. And my competitors, I think, are VC, or some of them are, and it's like sometimes they'll like they'll go for like a lot of vanity metrics to show like this big jump from nothing to something big, but it's not, like you said, it's not based on a foundation. It's like it seems like it can crumble really easily for many different reasons. So they'll like buy followers, and then it'll like look like really big, but there's not really like a lot of action on their posts. And then
did someone say bubble?
A bubble. Like popping, like it's gonna explode. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to call it a foundation of marshmallows.
So, there you go. That's good.
Yeah, you build a like an outside structure. It looks like it's good, but the foundation is marshmallows, and it's not. Like something can go really wrong really fast.
Right.
And yeah, and even just like your reputation with that, like if something goes wrong and you haven't really built something up, and you haven't connected with customers or done something the slow way, then all these things that you've done, like paid for followers or the shortcuts that you took, once you mess up, those things are going to come out. And even just that, even like the reputation can be a foundation of marshmallows. So
right, yeah. Whereas you focused more on actually connecting with people and doing that, rather than it's diametrically opposite to maybe doing everything you can to just track up numbers again that look good as metrics.
There was a company recently that like this was a huge issue with them. They raised, it was called Fast. Did you hear about them?
No.
They raised like millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they were making like $50,000 a month or something off of hundreds of millions of dollars, and all of the money that they were raising was going to like and I don't like spreading rumors, so like I don't know how much of this is like 100% accurate, but like what it seemed like was the founder was spending money on all these publicity stunts, driving in on Ferraris to conferences and like doing donuts, like
right,
yeah, and like they had made it seem like this was like this profitable company, but it was all just like a show. And they burned through hundreds of millions of dollars on I don't know what, but they were making $50,000 a month, which is good if you didn't spend. Like I was like, oh, that's good, but they had to close down the whole company after. I don't know how much exactly they burned, but it was a short amount. In short amount of time, it was a lot of money that just like no. It's so crazy to me that nobody was making sure that they're putting money into something that's building something real. I guess this happens a lot in VC because they want like it's going for the unicorn, going for like something really big, some big image that the founder is putting in front of their faces, like this is what it's going to be, and they just want to jump straight to there without paying attention to what's going on in between.
Yeah, it sounds like we definitely might need almost a movement to bring this to people's attention, that what is good for them might not be this fast track to riches or fame or anything, which we mentioned fame sucks really.
But I like it too.
Well, That's because you're not bona fide famous yet. I think if you read the Tim Ferriss blog post about the dark sides of being famous, I don't know, it completely took any sort of wish I had.
Because I want fame, and I get nervous that it's not gonna, if I get it, I won't like it when it comes.
Yeah, I think ideally for me, I think about it a lot, not because I think I'm actually going to be famous, but what if, it's important for me to think about things which I may not necessarily reach that point, but just as a fun experiment, like what if you do win the lottery? Okay. Most people just get there and they're like, what the hell, where am I? I thought that was just a dream. What if you just get to a point where you're famous and you have no idea what this entails, and soon you find out that it actually sucks because you do really get letters to your house of like, I'm gonna kill you and stuff just because you're famous. And some crazy people, that's their thing, they're crazy. So I like thinking ahead of time of the consequences of different scenarios, and ultimately it could be disturbing probably if a lot of people know you and know about you and so on.
But doesn't it also mean that you might have done something really well and like you might have contributed something?
Yes, it could. Maybe there's a way around it though. That's a question. Do you need to be recognized for good things that you've done? It's a question. Like, is it for you, or is it for them? Is it not really the feeling that we want to have that we did something good that we want? And again, you have the fame coming with that, but is it something that we really want? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I guess you don't need necessarily to associate your name with the work you've done. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I've thought a lot about what it's like to, if you write a book and you use a pseudonym where it's just not your real name, right? And it's a fantastic book and people love it. You still get the royalties, okay? I assume that you're actually going to be happier than the very famous author. Like, you might not get the same, you might not be seated immediately at the restaurant upon arrival or whatever some of the perks are of actually being famous, but you also won't get the death threats and so on. So people like Daft Punk, for example, I think they're probably doing better than actual famous musicians whose faces you'd recognize on the street.
Yeah. But are their names known?
Yeah. No, and there are photos of them. They were part of the music scene. They're not completely anonymous, but you and I won't recognize them. All the people in their industry know them.
There's all sorts of different fame. Like, do you want to be afraid of something because of the possible negative effects when there are also possible upsides to it? Like, I'm not afraid. I get weird people. Weird people can talk to you on the street, but you don't not go outside.
Yeah. I'm genuinely not sure. I'm thinking like,
I don't know either. Yeah.
Maybe you could just do something differently. Like, if you recognize that there could be, it's not that you give up, say, oh, I'm not going to make music so I don't, God forbid, become famous, but maybe you put on a mask. Maybe there are like creative ways out of that will do that. And I also think I want to tie it back to the idea of patience and doing a lot of the work quietly. I think it connects quite directly to also the type of relationship that you have with people who are involved in this, whether they are fans or customers or anyone like that, which we touched on, but more explicitly, I think that the value of one person who is truly rooting for you and, will actively share your message, will actively talk to people about who you are because they got to know you on a personal level. That's tricky. You can't put a number to that, a metric, right? And I think that's why it's so tempting to go to like audience size, because you can show people, okay, there are 30K people seeing my every tweet or whatever. But this one person who is actually now an ally, who's very actively assisting you much more than 10,000 people who are just passively, if they click a like, so what? Mm-hmm. This is something that should be a lot more often praised, and I think and appreciated. I don't think it's appreciated enough how much personal relationships matter and in what way.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess that's why I like posting that way, like posting what I'm doing, because it may be boring to a lot of people, but it keeps people around who are more invested in me actually as a person.
Yes.
And that's like, it kind of is. So is fame like when the people around you stop knowing you really, but they're still okay. Yeah. So like, even though like that can be bad, I guess. 'Cause that's when you have people who are like, who can either really, really admire you. Well, really, I like that. I like the admiration. So they could really, really admire you, which is nice. And I don't think that's just a selfish thing, though it's partly selfish. But then you have also people who like don't really know you and they can hate you.
Yeah, they do know you, but they know a sliver of what you have to offer as a person, because if you're whatever, the motivation for their admiring matters too. So, I mean, supposedly singers are admired for singing and models are admired for looks, and the Elon Musks of the world are admired for having money and so on. So it's just taking this narrow part of your personality. Obviously they don't really know what it's like, and we never do, which we see evidence that this is not easy to deal with, right? Seeing actual famous people struggling with this, and this is because you're not perceived as a real person. And I think a lot of people happily kind of lunge forward at this and try to get to this point without really thinking about what it looks like. And that was my point when I said, I want to look forward and anticipate challenges, and then maybe I will still decide to do what I do, probably, but I will anticipate this, and maybe there's a creative way of avoiding some of that, at least, because I don't think that anybody in the end wants to be known just by one aspect of their personality. Right.
Yeah. I see people who, well, first of all, I like that thing you said about the musician who saw the video of people messing up and having a hard time. I feel like people should just like publish more of those difficult times. And I would love seeing stuff like that. I think that's great. Like exposing yourself to the difficult things that people are going through and understanding that. But yeah, I see people who will get caught in like, now I realize what people like. So I'm going to keep posting that. I'm going to throw out like whatever else I was doing and whatever else I like to do. And it could just be like the way they talk. Like somebody could be, there's a lot of people are talking about tech, but some people start talking about it in a negative way. And that gets a lot of likes. If you can share something gossipy and negative in the tech community, people love that. But like, I don't want to be known for being, if I wanted to, any of us could like get really popular because it's so easy. There's so many formulas, but like, you don't want to be popular for something
Right.
that you're not going to want to continue to do. Now, this is why people like you. But I like the idea of having people like me for me, right? So I'm going to keep posting what I like to post. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're going to get some flack from some people for it, and that's a good thing because it means that you're still showing parts of yourself that aren't curated. If you were to become an addict to popularity, then you would start thinking about saying all the right things all of the time, and that just takes a toll, I think. Yeah, and I think that the theme of this podcast is well-being and what it means to live well. And I think that it should be emphasized that generally speaking, the approach of connecting with people personally, of doing maybe lower intensity work over a longer period of time, which is more like slow and steady wins the race, except maybe life isn't a race. It's not something that's to be won, and we don't actually compete with other people. And I think there needs to be a realization that for your own well-being, this is a more sound approach than trying to conquer some peaks in a crazy time and be featured as a millionaire by 25 or any sort of very, very ambitious goal, because it takes a toll. And just as you say, I know somebody who has hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's not easy being him. Okay. So then when I was thinking about what it's like, I realized, well, if you don't have to work, most of us have to work and have to worry about money for at least some part of our week or month or something like that. And we're not guaranteed to never run out of money. And we can complain about it because it's not the most fun activity. It feels like, let's say, climbing a mountain, right? Mm-hmm. But actually, if you reach the top of that mountain, it's a fallacy that there is nothing to do, because then you get atrophied, and even being comfortable gets uncomfortable. Just give it a few minutes, right? If you were so comfortable on your couch for 30 minutes, you're going to be very uncomfortable the next day when your back hurts. And this is exactly what I see in him having all the money. It's almost like now you're thrown into this exercise which you actually haven't done all your life, because now your problems are not the money problems. They're like, what the hell am I? What do I even like doing? Problem, which is no less serious.
I think we have a lot of goals that we want to get to, and we think that when we get to them, it will like feel like success. But then when we get to them, it's like a relief, but it's not success. Like when I thought I would feel like successful when I exercised every day. And I feel proud that I got to that point, but it wasn't like success. It was just like a relief. It was like, okay, now I can focus on, now that I have this habit built, I can focus on what I really want. And same with building Wish Tender. It's like I just got into like an amount of profit that's like, okay, this is an actual salary, and I've never really had an actual salary, and I've always felt incomplete never having an actual salary. But it's not like I've reached self-actualization or anything like that. It's just like I have this relief of, okay, I can do it. I can get to this point now, but there's still stuff left to figure out, like to make myself whole. So getting $100 million, especially if you do it really fast, like if you are really successful really fast, you're going to be left with a lot of questions and a lot of like it's like excess success, I would think, where people look at you like you're really successful, but that maybe even makes you feel more lost.
Yes, that's another issue with, gaining publicity, or people seem to know you, especially if you land in a position that is highly desirable by large numbers of people. They just look at you and you lose, basically in their eyes, you lose any sort of right to ever complain about where you are, or say, hey, I'm still struggling with some things, because people are immediately there to jump and say, well, if you're struggling, then let's switch places. You can take my struggles if you want. And so that's very true. And I think that in general, I really like the idea of doing things patiently and really getting to slowly get used to the water as you get in, slowly get to know the environment, and slowly come up with strategies and tactics to really get to where you want to get, without the pressure of making it or anything like that. I think it does, in the long run, maximize your chances to actually get there, probably because you haven't skipped any very important stages or steps.
Yeah, you almost reduce the luck part if you're going slowly.
Right.
Because everything you do, you're looking at really closely and you're learning from really closely, and you're creating this foundation in you that's like can handle this when it happens again, because you're more analytical and you're more purposeful about all the challenges you're going through. And it's not like just throwing something and getting a bunch of money and throwing it at something to try to grow it really fast. You're like understanding how everything's working. And so I think risk taking is important, but you maybe learn more from taking smaller risks. Like a bigger risk is fast. It goes faster. Like, I'm going to try to throw $100 million into this business, and it will either grow really fast right now, or it will fail. And that's a big risk. And you're cutting out time and you're exchanging it for money or whatever. And you're also not, like, if you come out of something like that you took a big risk on, you're throwing luck at it, and you're not going meticulously through how you could have different routes you could have taken to not just rely fully on this like black or white, yes or no risk. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it reminds me of the ancient Greek virtue of sophrosune, which is hard to translate, and even into Latin. Cicero wasn't doing a very good job translating it. But if you actually look at Plato's dialogue on the subject and analyze it correctly, which most scholars don't, you realize that this virtue is really can be described as doing things in orderly fashion. And I think that taking on a huge risk is not doing it orderly. And sometimes the gamble could pay off, which is the weird part. But I think that for a lot of people that took a huge gamble and won, which can happen, and these are actually a lot of the people that we hear about, because that's everybody's dream, to take a gamble and win. There is even a lacuna in their understanding of how the hell they got there. And
lacuna is like a empty, like a
something lacks, like a lacking. Something is lacking in their understanding of how they actually got there, and they're actually very unlikely to reproduce what they did. So you're probably not going to see a lot of consistency in doing that. Whereas if you have more consolidated knowledge of how you got to a place and what the steps you were taking, especially if you documented them like you did, it's much more likely that you're going to be able to replicate your success if and when it comes.
Right. I noticed with a lot of first-time founders I talked to, I would get a lot of bad advice because there'd be a lot of first-time founders that got successful, but they didn't really understand why. And if I talked to second-time founders, the advice was usually pretty different. A lot of times it was more
hedged, probably.
What does that mean? I think so.
I mean that they hedge themselves, they know how to say, it's like, well, here's my advice. It could be wrong, okay? Because
exactly. They did. That's what they did. Yeah, that's exactly what they did. The first time founders were very confident.
Yeah.
That like I needed to do this specific thing, and the second time founders were like, I think you could try it this way or maybe this way. And then I would be like, I don't know, I'm kind of doing it this other way. And they're like, oh yeah, that might work too. They're like, well, exactly. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Because they realize that, yeah, there's not just one way. When you do something one way and it works and you've never failed, then you don't know that you have a false sense of like, knowing. So the long-term failure helps you realize what the actual path is, which is often, I guess, it seemed like for them, it was often, there wasn't one. It was more like patience. It seemed like it, like just don't give up. That was one of the things I heard from most people who had a lot of experience was like, there's not really one way to succeed, but the one way to fail is just to
give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good advice right there. Yeah, Dashiell, well, this has been great. I really enjoyed it. And I would love for you to share with listeners what Wish Tender actually is, because we were just talking about it, and also, where you could be found and any such details.
Okay, well, Wish Tender is a platform for content creators to get gifts from fans anonymously and safely. So you create a page, list items you want or things you want funded, like rent, and then you send it to your followers and they can fund it for you. And then you can, oh, my voice. It's too early. It's not really that early, but I woke up late. You can find me at Twitter mostly at _Bark-Huss, and also Instagram and LinkedIn, Dashiell Bark-Huss on LinkedIn, but mostly Twitter, but I'm on a lot of places. What about the actual website of Wish Tender, or just the app store? It's wishtender.com. Nice. Yeah. All right. And you can follow Wish Tender too. Nice. I'll put the links, of course. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this with me. And I really enjoyed it. And I keep wishing you luck. I'm one of these fans of yours that is happy to hear about any development with Wish Tender. So keep doing well, both in life and in tech. And until next time. Thank you, Eyal. And I hope the same for you. Thanks.